Hello! I thought that because this month we're talking all about color, the colors of the rainbow, that we should get right to the basics. And we'll go right to the very heart of it, mixing your polymer clay colors so that you get unusual blends, interesting mix, tricks that you can do to really make your colors pop. So why don't you come with me to my studio and we'll get right up into the pasta machine and see how to mix some things in an unusual, different way, maybe ways you've never thought of before, to really get some interesting colors in your creation. All right, let's roll. Okay, so this is usually how I have my studio set up. I've got clays by different colors just in clumps. I like clumps because clumps allows me to just kind of pull right from it and go, ooh, I like that little bit. Oh, wait a minute, maybe I want some of this in there. And I can always have an interesting blend right at my fingertips. I don't have to open a package each time and try to, make sure I put it back properly. I'm not a big one for putting things back properly. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is one of the most simple little blending mixes that I use all the time, and I kind of call it a little bit of a tornado because you're grabbing a whole pile of clay, and I'm using colors that I think are going to look good together, and I'm just going to kind of smash them together. We're going to do a couple tricks with it. In the end, you'll see where the tornado comes from, but the first step is just kind of smashing them all in a wad, and I usually roll it out in my hands, or I use a roller just to get it flattened. You don't want to put a big blob of clay in your pasta machine because it's hard on the rollers, and that contributes a lot to the breakdown of a machine. You'll also notice that I did not precondition colors. So I have certain colors like this white here that is a lot more crumbly than some of these other ones. I like that because that means this thing is going to like crackle, because it's not as smooth and flexible, and I kind of like the way that looks. So once I've rolled it down, my first thing that I'm going to do is just to throw it in the machine. So you can kind of see how that looks. It's just a big wad of stuff. There's nothing exciting going on yet, but the possibilities are endless. And you can see what I mean about this crackling. It's making some interesting blends right there. I do always check the backside too. Usually on this first go round, there's nothing to see, but oftentimes that backside will have some interesting stuff. Now on this, I'm going to rip it and stack it. I'm a big fan of rip and stack. And the reason is every time you rip and stack clays together, I'll pick up all the scraps, is you see all that? You're getting a bunch of little layers in there. And all those layers are potential changes of color. And you want those. So I'm going to take this and run it through one more time. And you can roll it with a roller if you want to flatten it out a bit. Now you can start seeing what's happening. Now some of these colors are blending. That white that was unconditioned and harder than the rest is still crackling quite a bit. Some of the softer clays are being nice and smooth. So I'm going to take this mess and I'm going to roll it up. Ooh, look at the backside. Isn't that neat? Now, just by itself, that can become something fun. But we're doing something else right now. We'll come back and revisit that. But I'm going to roll this baby up. Now, when you roll it up, what you're doing is you're taking all those little layers that you had and you're making them all curl around, right? I'm going to roll that and just make sure that everybody's grabbed well together. I also don't cut and measure anything. I like irregular chunks because it gives me a much more organic and chaotic mix, and that's where all the fun is and all the chaos. Now, if I was to cut this open right now, there's some fun stuff in there. As a matter of fact, I am going to take a piece of this because we're going to do something else with it, but you can kind of get an idea here of all of the little colors that are inside there. There's some fun things we can do with that, so I'm going to save that in a minute. But for now, we're going to go to the tornado. And the tornado is this. Woo! It's twisting, twisting. So you can see where I get that idea from. But the twisting just mixes up all of the color. Then you've got your cutting blade, slice that in half, and take a look what you have inside. You're always going to have some kind of really interesting pattern. Lots of color all mixed in, and you saw how quickly it took me to get that color thoroughly mixed. If you just took a big sheet of clay and you blopped on a couple of colors and ran it through the pasta machine, by the time it took you to blend those colors in, everything would be faded. But this gives you instant access to all your colors. So I'm going to take this and flatten it out a bit because, again, it's a bit too big to go in the pasta machine. Press it flat. You can use your roller if you want to, and I'm going to run that through the machine. By the way, I've got the machine at the third widest setting. I usually do most of my mixing at the second or third widest setting. The biggest setting, it's a little hard on the machine because the gears are the most wide apart, so you want to go to at least the second setting if you can. And anything too tight makes the blends happen so quickly that you miss good stuff. So again, I'm looking on both sides and you can see you have quite a variety. They're both interesting. But what I like to do now is I like to look at my choices and say, all right, what in here amuses me? Is there some part here that I think would look really fun? Well, of course, up here is fun because it's got this weird brown bit, and down here is fun because it's got all this kind of pinky bits, and of course that's nifty. So I'm going to rip this and stick it down here because I can, and I'm going to fold the rest of this stuff out of my face because I always want the part that amuses me the most to be right in my face. Now you'll notice that I'm always folding before I put it back in the machine. That's because you've got to have a thicker than the roller's bit of clay in order for it to be smushed and therefore spread out. Okay, so now I've got some of this color here, and I'm doing the same little trick where I'm folding away the stuff that doesn't amuse me quite as much. And let's roll that through again. I'm also rolling it through so that I'm going to go with the stripes. So you saw that I have the stripes and I want them to continue all the way through the piece. We'll look on the back side just to be sure. I also have a big flap up here that I don't care anything about, and a hole down at the bottom. So now I'm looking at this, and I've put that flap down here to kind of spread in that hole, and I'm going to look at this and go, okay, I think I'm pretty close to having an interesting blend here. It only needs 1 or 2 more times through the machine. I like what's here. If I continue to go this way, I'll have striations that come this way, which I might like, but I also might like it to kind of feather out and go a little crazy. So I'm going to fold it again 1 more time, and now I'm going to put it through this way instead of this way. And that should cause those colors to just sort of skew. And I think if you look closely here, you can see there's that crackle from the white we talked about. Because it's not blending in as thoroughly, it gives you some really amazing little bits and pieces. We still have a little hole there, so if that sickens you, you can kind of press it together and pinch that closed and it's gone, or you can fold it and run it through 1 more time. But I'm finding that this area right here has a very, very wonderful pattern. I like it a lot. So what I normally would do would just be to cut away the part I don't like as much and hang on to this, because I'll use this for whatever it is. I may make leaves or a flower, or it might be a background for something, whatever it is I'm trying to blend for, a veneer that I can wrap over a heart, whatever you have. Now I have just this little leftover bits, and there's not much to this. It's just a sort of pinky blend. So I'm going to throw that through again, because now I'm going to go back to this little swirl that I had here. Now there's a couple things you can do with this. The first one is just cut a couple of chunks off. So I'm going to cut a few slices off of this. That's on my first bit. And I'm going to just place those on the swirl that I just have here. And so now what we've got is a couple of little bits right there. Now, as you can tell, when I put this through the wringer, it's going to pull these stripes and make them a pattern of some kind. And because it's going to elongate them, you're going to have an elongated pattern. Now, you might go, wow, I kind of like that, just like that. That's cool. It's got a lot of rainbow colors, the pattern amuses me, etc. Or you might go, well, it's almost there. What if I fold it again, run it through again, and see what happens? Each time you go through, you're going to be able to pull these patterns out, make them more subtle, blend them more thoroughly into your clay. This amuses me. I like that. That might be another really fun piece. And of course, these two go together because they're in the same color range that you just did. So you may do something where both of those pieces are used and they look really nice together, but they're very distinctly different. All right, so now let's go back to this little bit that we have still here. And let's roll this one up even thinner, because I'm going to do a little chop on this and see if we can make sort of an agate looking pattern. So I've got all those swirls are in there. I've rolled them a bit more to reduce it out so it's more of the thickness of a big crayon. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to roll it over my finger. Then I'm going to use my cutting blade and I'm going to slice right straight through. And what that does is it cuts through and it shows you all of the layers that are inside. I'm going to do that several times, because each time you cut through, you're exposing a little bit different part of those layers. You see how that works? And you see how we're getting kind of an agate pattern there. Going to keep on doing that. Do a little bit more. Now you can use all these little bits that are left. You see how fun those are? Those can be used as textures. They can be placed on top, or they can be blended into the clay just like we did with the other one. They're very nifty little things. But what you have now is you have something here that has sort of an agate look to it. I'm going to cut away the distracting bits and take a look what you have here. I've just flattened it with my hand so you can kind of see that. But take a look at that fun pattern. Isn't that nifty? So just like that, it's fine. Or you can run it through the machine again and you have the same idea where you're spreading out those cuts. And all of those little nifty things then become a very interesting pattern. And they're even interesting when they get rolled up and you use just the you know, the pattern as you see it this way. So you've got the same kind of things, but now this can become an accent bit and you just have those nice little blendy bits. So all of those things, the layering and the stacking, the rolling, the cutting, the chunking out of little chunks, all of that is all with that one grab of weird color. Look at how many things you get to do with that. All right, doesn't that look fun? Okay, we're going to look at another way of playing with clay and color. Okay, so now we got another little blend to play with, and this one is sort of an oceany color scheme, and it works very well for anything that's oceans or clouds. You can do it with any color you like, but it's especially nice for ocean. So I'm starting with a little blend of white and glitter white, and to that, I'm just kind of adding some random blues and peacocks and a slight bit of green that I got lying around. And you notice that I've got just little teeny stupid bits of clay and I've just smashed them on there. No particular rhyme or reason. And as I usually do, I'm number one, flattening it so it'll go through my machine. And number two, just putting it through. See what happens. First go round. First go round is always nothing. It's just blending the colors in. And I'm going to do that little blend that I do where I fold and so that things that amuse me are in my face. But before I even do that, the way I placed this little green, it made it go way over here, which you'll get lost. So I'm going to stick that back in the middle where it can have fun with its friends. All right, so now I've got this. Remember that if you have stripes of color and you put it in the machine this way, the stripes will continue. I'm not too interested in stripes this time, so I'm going to put it the other way. And in we go. Now this begins the blending process. I'm going to do it one more time. I want to show you a little something that you can do. Now, many of us, when we're blending, we just feel like, oh, well, that's all that happened in the machine. I guess that's the color now. Yeah, it's a machine. You can manipulate this however you want. You don't have to be locked into what the machine does. The machine's just there as a tool for you. So you can take this whole look and go, okay, if I keep putting this in over and over and over again, by the time all these colors blend together, I will have lost all the drama. But I don't like these big chunks. There's lines there. I hate that. What can I do? Oh, what? Tell me, Christy. Well, one of the things you can do is you can take a tool, and I'm using the Gotta Have It tool. It's one of my 4 stainless steel tools, and I frickin' love it, and I'm sure you will too. And this is one of the reasons why, is because it's very good for shoving things around. So I'm going to take this clay that amuses me, but it's too bright, and I'm going to start pulling it with my tool. So see what I'm doing is I am using the tool to start doing some of the blending that it would take forever for the machine to do. So I'm dragging this clay in a pattern that feels very wavy to me, and I'm breaking up all these little straight lines. So now let's take this, and again I'm going to fold it just a little bit because we have that same issue where if we put this in without a little extra, nothing's going to happen. Now I want you to take, when I run it through, the difference between here and here. Here still has some big blocks of color, right? So I'm going to run that through. Now see how these are starting to blend in this nifty little wavy pattern. These are not doing so much. I'm going to fold it again, and now I'm going to change directions this way. Take a look what just happened there. How cool is this? So you've got all of these little kind of in-between stripes. You've immediately made everything blend. And this isn't so bad up here, but you can see how quickly this blended just by using your little tool to manipulate things. And then, of course, if you want to, you can use that other trick of using your finger to do a twist. And I think you guys already know about the little twisty trick, but I'm going to show it to you again, because you can just take your thumb, and anywhere there's multiple colors, you can use your thumb to drag those into a circular pattern. And that works especially nice when you're doing something wavy. Now you see how you've got texture there. So if that sickens you, you can again fold and run that through. You're going to elongate those curls, but look what you get. Now everything's smooth. You have these slight little swirly patterns in there. Very, very ocean-like. And if you didn't like it, you can go back to your tool and drag again and manipulate your pattern so that it becomes something that you do like. So there's my lines again. Let's throw that through one more time. And you can see a little bit of tool in there, so I'll have to run it through again, but you can see how now I've swirled these back and forth, making everything just blend that much quicker. And don't forget, when you run through the machine, sometimes you have really wonderful edges, and those can be really wonderful. Don't overlook those. Like, all you would need to do on this piece is maybe take that off and swirl these a little bit, and look at how oceanesque you feel already up there if you were going to do a plaque or a wall piece with little things running around in here, fish and whatnot. Doesn't this make it feel like ocean up there already? All right, so a fun little wonderful trick using your tools, using your thumb, using your machine, and you feel very, very watery. Okay, you ready to try another one? I have gathered together a grouping of greens, as you can see, all kinds of greens, a little bit of brown in there for contrast, and I'm going to wad them up, my usual trick. And wadding them up, I have very soft clay, which it's very fresh, so I don't really have a lot of concerns about conditioning. If your clay is much harder, you may want to precondition your colors before you do that, but I tend to go through my colors rather quickly, and so they tend to work really well first time around. So I'm going to run this through the pasta machine. Again, just to flatten out all those colors that we did, and I'm going to do the rip and stack. The rip and stack, like I said, is one of my favorite go-to moves because it is unlimited the amount of fun that you have when you just have these random stackings of color. Now, all I'm going to do with this stack is start slicing it to see how interesting it is inside. Okay, very interesting. I have a kind of a big wad right there, which is not as interesting, but guess what? I can do this, and that wad changes shapes, and this and that wad changes shapes. Stick those together, and I've made myself kind of a custom little cane here. Let's see what that looks like when I cut it. Much more funner, huh? So now what I'm going to do with this is I'm just going to cut little microscopic, and by microscopic I mean as thin as I can, which for me it's not as thin as it could be, but I'm just cutting some little teeny thin slivers of this. What I want to do is make a veneer. And a veneer essentially means any kind of thin covering that you put over something else. The reason is, when you have these wonderful thin things like this, it's limited to how much use you can get out of them because they're just little thin bits. If you play with them too much, they start distorting, as you saw by when we put in all the stuff into the pasta machine. You could see how those colors change right away. But now when I start making my own little custom-made sheet of color out of this, I can use this in a number of ways. So what I've done is I've made like a little flat bit of something that works with it. This one's a brown, and I've put it on a tile. Tiles are nice to work on because they give you a good strong base to play with, and it holds the clay steady while you're goofing around with it. And I'm just going to make a couple little bits here. You can kind of force one on top of the other, and that's not a problem. And let's call it a day. So now I've got some nice layers of color, but right now that color is bumpy, which sometimes I want, but today I don't. So I'm going to just take my roller first. The roller is a good way to manipulate the surface without distorting your lines too much. Again, we can put this in the machine and make a blend out of it and it would be lovely, but right now this is a little better by just using that roller to get the surface done. All right, I'm going to take my blade. I'm going to trim some of this excess away. I don't need quite so much goo, and that goo will be useful for other things, but right now I'm bored of it, so I'm going to take it away. You also notice that I never really worry too much about whether something's straight or not. That's just me. You may have needs for straightness. If so, go right ahead. I don't care. So I'm going to just take this little veneer off now, and you can see what we've got is we've got a layer of color. I'm going to put this through the machine. I'm going to go back to like the number 2 setting so it's not squishing it very much. It's just sort of flattening the whole thing out. And now I have one solid layer. There's no bumps, there's no ridges. It's just the color. And I can continue to manipulate this smaller, one little layer at a time, and going with the grain, I will have minimal amount of distortion. Now what can I do with that? Well, a lot of things. I can cut shapes out of that and sort of make like a mosaic out of that, like a collage kind of effect, or I can cover things with it. Let's say I had all this scrap and I was going to make a heart or something like that with it. I'll roll this up into just like a little, oval shape or whatever. Now I could take my veneer and I could lay that over the oval and it will become covered with this. I'm not going to go through the whole process, but you see what we've got here is that we can cover that surface, and now you can manipulate that design into the shape that you want without losing it, which you would if you were just trying to roll it by itself. So veneers are very useful little puppies to have, and having them like this, of course, is a very, very handy way of doing things. One other thing with the veneer I want to show you before I escape with this, and let's put this back down, flatten it back out again. is with a tool, and we're going to use this one. This is the Wow It's Awesome tool, and wow, it's awesome. You can take this tool and you can drag a series of lines straight down. This is the same kind of process that you would use back in the day when you're making marbleized paper. It's a similar idea of dragging. Now you noticed I flipped it around and I'm going in between those lines the other direction. So what that does is it makes a series of little lines that are one going one way, one going the other way. That by itself is lovely, but if we now put this through the machine, I'm going to have to make it thinner just so you can see what the heck's going on here. Go with the stripes, and I'll put this out so you can see. Now look what you get. You get this wonderful sort of chevron pattern, and because you've dragged the colors back and forth. So isn't that a nifty little look? And I'm sure you can come up with a lot of ways to use that color pattern. Okay, one last thing I wanted to show you is that do not forget that you have the option of manipulating your clays with things like glitter. You can also use embossing powder, but embossing powder does different things in the oven. They melt and they do different stuff, so experiment with those a bit. But you're fine with glitter. They will stay exactly as they are. This is a red micro glitter from the Superhero set in my Surface Effects kits, and I'm just going to rub that on the surface so that it grabs. Now, just by itself, once I've rubbed this all on, I want you to see what this looks like. By itself, this makes a wonderful surface. Can you see how glittery and shiny that is? You can cut shapes out of that and add them to things, and you just have this lovely surface shimmer that works out really well. But we're just going to incorporate glitter into the clay. So I've folded it on itself, and I'm grabbing. You want to try to keep this glitter as contained as you can, because as you well know, glitter does not like to stay within the bounds that you have made for it. It likes to get out amongst the friends of the world. So try to keep it self-contained. Run it through the machine, and we're going to do that a couple of times, and you should be able to supercharge your clay with lots of glitter. So you want to do it multiple times because it takes a while for the glitter that's on the inside to permeate the whole mix. But it is a wonderful way of adding. There are a number of glitter clays, but it's a wonderful way of adding glitter to a clay that doesn't have it, or adding even more glitter. So can you see there's a lot of shimmer and shine to that, which just makes for a super fun way of playing with your clay. Okay, so wasn't that fun? It is so much fun to play with color, and polymer clay is probably one of the best mediums in the world for tactile color. You've got paints, you've got tiles, you've got a million things in the world to play with the art universe, but polymer lets you not only make color, but touch color and smear color and blend color. So as you go into this month's projects, all about the rainbow and all the colors therein, I hope you'll use some of those blending tricks to really make your creations pop.